What if all plants stopped photosynthesis? At first, no one noticed. The trees still stood tall. Grass was still green. Flowers bloomed, seemingly untouched. But in laboratories and research stations, something strange was happening. A group of botanists in South Korea were the first to see the anomaly. Chlorophyll levels in test plants had plummeted overnight. The plants weren't absorbing CO2. They were alive, but not functioning. Then came the second wave of data. Global CO2 levels rose sharply over 72 hours. Weather balloons and satellite instruments confirmed it. Photosynthesis had stopped. Everywhere. Trees, crops, algae, even ocean plankton. The largest planetary life process had simply shut down. Still, most of the world remained unaware. It wasn't until 5 days later that things began to unravel. Oxygen levels in the atmosphere began to decline, just slightly, but noticeably. Hospital patients with respiratory issues were the first to be affected. Then athletes, hikers at altitude. At the same time, food crops began to wilt. Without photosynthesis, plants couldn't produce energy. They weren't dying yet, but they were starving. By the end of the first week, every major government had declared a state of emergency. Panic spread. People rushed to buy oxygen tanks. The price of bottled air spiked. Hoarding began, not of food, but of plants, seeds, fertilizers. Scientists worked around the clock. Bioengineers tried to reawaken photosynthetic pathways. Nothing worked. Some turned to artificial photosynthesis machines, but they were expensive, rare, and too few. Agriculture was the first to collapse. Fields of wheat turned yellow. Rice paddies went sour. Corn crumbled. Livestock began to suffer from lack of fresh feed. Grocery stores emptied in days. By the end of the second month, food production had declined by 90%. The oceans followed. Phytoplankton, microscopic plant life that formed the base of the marine food chain, had vanished. Fish began to die, then whales. Coral reefs faded to white and crumbled to dust. Without oxygen-producing algae, aquatic animals suffocated in silence. The skies began to change. With no CO2 being drawn down, the greenhouse effect accelerated. Temperatures climbed faster than any model predicted. The atmosphere thickened with moisture and carbon. Storms grew fiercer. Floods ravaged coastal cities. But it was the air itself that caused the greatest fear. With each breath, humans took in less oxygen. It became harder to think clearly. To move. To sleep. The world adapted desperately, unevenly. Domed cities rose in wealthier nations, filled with oxygen-scrubbing machines and climate-controlled gardens powered by LEDs. Poorer regions turned to underground bunkers, pressurized habitats, anything that could simulate life before the collapse. Breathing became a privilege. Children were born in sealed rooms, never knowing the smell of trees or the feel of fresh grass beneath their feet. In the absence of natural plant life, synthetic ecosystems were built. Towers of engineered moss under artificial light. Gene-edited bacteria that could absorb small amounts of CO2 and produce trace oxygen. It wasn't enough. But it slowed the descent. Religion changed. Entire movements sprang up around the last living tree in certain regions, tended to like a relic of a god. Stories spread of an ancient forest hidden deep in the Amazon that still breathed, untouched by the collapse. Expeditions were launched. Most never returned. One did. They brought back a single sapling. A tiny thing, barely clinging to life, found in a cave where light seeped through a crack in the stone. Scientists studied it in awe. Its chloroplasts still functioned. It still made sugar from light. They cloned it. Then again. And again. It was not a cure, but it was a beginning. Over years, then decades, oxygen slowly stabilized. Greenhouses filled with cloned plants. Genetically modified forests began to rise, their leaves humming under ultraviolet lamps. The world outside was still hostile, dry, thin-aired, stormy, but inside the shelters, life flickered. And yet, something had changed forever. The Earth had shown that it could stop. That even its most ancient systems were not guaranteed. The age of green abundance was over. Humanity had been reminded that it did not command nature. It depended on it, utterly. Every child born after the collapse learned about photosynthesis first, before numbers, before language. The process that kept their blood red and their lungs full. The silent miracle of sunlight turned into breath. They planted their first tree before they spoke their first word. And every morning, before work, before school, before war, people across the world paused to touch a leaf and whisper thanks.